Good morning, everybody. Hope you are all staying well. And I know that there's a lot going on, and I just, hopeful that everything's going to work out okay. I believe that it will. And I'm just keeping on moving forward. A lot of my events for the day were canceled. So I'm going to take this opportunity to catch up on some videos that I've been wanting to do and some wellness consultations. So the other day we had a conversation about gaps in nutrition, and I want to continue that and have that discussion in a couple of pieces and parts specifically. So this video is going to be about proteins and fats, and then we're going to step into organ meat a little bit. So I think it was Wednesday, maybe Thursday, I don't know, doesn't matter. Shared with you the foods that the client brought for their dog to board with me for a few days and where some of the gaps in that were missing. So one of the things I want to drill into is about fats and proteins. When you look at a packet of hamburger meat, for example, ground hamburger, and it says 80-20, that means per portion of meat, there is 20% fat and 80% leaner protein. The total combination makes your total protein source, right? So the minute you start adding any other ingredients to that, whether it's a carbohydrate, a vegetable, anything else, the percentage of fat total to the entire content of the bowl is reduced, right? So 20% of the meat, we now add other ingredients, sometimes as much as 25% other things are going into the bowl. So we've started to lower the total fat percentage of what's being fed to the dog. So when you start buying leaner meats, think chicken without the skin. Think white meat chicken, white fish, even turkey or pork or lamb. Those meats will typically be leaner in many cases than ground beef. So when you have an extremely lean protein source, you have to add a source of fat back to the diet. Typically, we are looking to add animal fats, and we can use things like clarified butter. You'll see it called ghee sometimes. We can use regular butter. You don't want to render these fats out. They need to just be soft and melty, but not cooked. We can even use something like tallow to add to the food bowl. Now you got to do a little math, right? You got to figure out what protein went in, what's sort of the percentage of fat that was there, and how to compensate for getting yourself into a range of around 15 to 20% total fat. We typically don't ever want to be less than 10% fat. A lot of people get really panicked about things like pancreatitis, and what we find, we'll do another topic on that, but what we find is that unrendered natural animal protein fats are really good for your dog. They're good for us. We need them in order to have amino acids get created in the body, to use things that are supportive to the cells of our body, our brain health, and all that goes with that. So we can't have our dogs on a fat-free diet. But I wanted to just highlight that you need to make sure that you understand when you're choosing a fat like an 80-20 protein, like an 80-20 hamburger, that's the percentage of the meat. When you start wrapping other nutritional ingredients into that, the percentage of total fat in the bowl will be slightly different. That all gets calculated if you're really doing things properly And again, you're going to try to keep yourself in a range of around 15 to 20% total. So for example, I use the Volhard diet because I don't want to calculate all this stuff. I don't even want to source all this stuff. Do my dogs get some added surprises and dollops in their bowl? They sure do, all the time. But with the diet like the Volhard, we use 80-20 meat most of the time. But when we add in the base mix, we're typically taking that percentage of fat down to around 18% total fat in the diet. Now, you then also have to say, well, where are they getting it from treats? Am I giving them other ingredients that maybe that they shouldn't have? And again, it's more often in these cooked, rendered, high fatty foods that our dogs get into that they shouldn't be into is where we start seeing some pancreatic episodes. If you have a dog with pancreatitis, for example, and you're looking to change into a home-cooked, raw-fed, what I call these modified raws, where you get these base mixes, you might take yourself slowly back into the reintroduction of fats and not just say, I'm going to start, at 20%, but ease your way forward a little bit. But I also need you guys to keep in mind that pancreatic issues can also be flared by really high carbohydrate diets as well that we find in our kibble. So rotate your proteins is a good thing to do. Typically, most people, well, let me rephrase that. Most people start trying to use chicken. And like I said, if you are using lean white meat chicken without the skin or without any dark meat, you virtually have no fat in your diet at all. And that long term is going to be a problem. But if you look at 80-20 hamburger, which we come out with a neutral protein, right? Chinese medicine tells us that that's neutral. Most dogs can tolerate it. We do that typically about 5 days a week. You could instead use turkey, you could use pork, you could use duck, you could use rabbit, lots of options. 1 day a week I'll do a dairy day, which might be whole milk yogurt, so whole fat yogurt because we need the fat, or whole milk cottage cheese, right? So I'll do that to give my dog's digestive system a day off of the clock from having to process so much rich red meat. If you are looking into the range of things like bison or venison, these are extremely lean meats. Venison is extremely lean. You will have to add a fat source. Now, if you do this once in a blue moon, not a big deal. But if you're trying to do this very regularly, then you're going to have to add a fat source. I have a client whose dog is got a lot of skin allergies, and she primarily feeds fish every day. So fish is extremely lean, so we have to add a fat source to this dog's diet. So there's a lot of combinations of doing this. The key is to know what you're doing, how much total protein's going in, what percentage of that is fat, and do I need to supplement my fat to keep myself in a good range? So if you have questions about that, let me know. It's really not hard once you get it, but it's kind of tricky to follow and understand. Other things that you need to think about in the diet is organ meat. We like to add organ meat to the diet. Now, some of you may prefer to do that in the form of freeze-dried treats, like a freeze-dried beef liver or freeze-dried duck liver, even freeze-dried chicken liver periodically, depending on your dog's tolerance for those foods. And tolerance can be an issue with allergies. It can also be an issue with behavior and aggression and arousal and anxiety that helps dictate the protein that you'll choose. But we typically need about 10% of the total diet to be organ meat. You'll also, as you follow along and I talk more about these things, you'll hear me talk a lot about what Chinese medicine tells us. And it'll tell us that like supports like. So liver meat supports the liver in the body. It can help in that area. It helps, gives nutrient and support to that system of the body. If you've got a dog that has kidney issues or heart issues, you might want to include some of those organ meats from fresh, young, reliable sources, like whole, real food, reliable sources, right, into your diet. The ratios when we're looking to calculate foods tells us that we typically need 10% of our proteins to be organ meat. Break that down even further, it's 5% all the other organ meats and 5% liver. Or said differently, no more than 5% of your total diet should be liver, because it's so rich and so specific in what it does that we shouldn't add too much liver to our diet. So again, you can look at resources that help you supply organ meats, or you can look at some of these freeze-dried products to use as a treat for your dog. What you'll find a lot of times in these raw base mixes, like the ones that I use, there is a bit of liver built into them. Volhard tends to use chicken liver in some cases. It's organic. So unless we have a dog with a really bad poultry allergy, it's typically okay. Even for my dogs that I'm trying to introduce cooling foods to, that amount of liver going in from an organic source typically doesn't create a problem. But for those dogs that it does, we're now using some products that have pork liver in them. That's in our new rescue diet. So you've got options. You may have a local butcher. You may have a local resource that is processing meats for the local farmers and all, and might be able to get some resources from that as well. Again, for me, sourcing all of that stuff and calculating all of that stuff was not something I wanted to do. Would I do it for my dog's health if I had to? Yes, but I have alternatives in specifically choosing the Volhard diet or other diets that might be similar to that. So home cooking doesn't have to be crazy difficult, but there are some pieces and parts you have to keep in mind. I'm working on a guide. So there's tons of books, right? There are tons and tons and tons of books about this, websites about it, but I'm working on a guide that sort of boils it all down for my clients and helps them keep the pieces and parts in mind as they're getting started. So if that's something that's of interest to you, schedule your wellness consultation. They're free right now. And that might be something that can be shared with you to help you get you on the right path. Okay, talk to you soon.